When Meghan Markle appeared on the cover of Vanity Fair under the headline "Wild About Harry," it looked like the beginning of an extraordinary ascent. At that moment, she had something most actresses spend their entire careers chasing. She had global curiosity, a royal romance, glossy magazine attention, Hollywood interest, and a story that could be sold in almost any market in the world. She was no longer just the actress from Suits. She was the American woman dating Prince Harry, the most emotionally famous spare in the British royal family. For Meghan, it must have felt like the door had finally opened. Vanity Fair was not just another magazine cover, it was cultural validation. It was the type of platform that tells the entertainment industry, the fashion industry, and the wider media world that a person has arrived. And yet, when you look back now, that cover also feels like the first sign of a pattern that would follow Harry and Meghan for years. Enormous opportunity, huge attention, and then a strange inability to turn that attention into stable long-term success. That is the real story. Not simply that Harry and Meghan made money after leaving the royal family. They did. Not that they had no offers, they had many. Not that they were ignored by the media. They were never ignored.
Prince Harry is not a particularly intelligent man, and as it turns out, that may cost him millions upon millions of pounds once the dust settles when it comes to his Daily Mail case. And there's definitely more to this case than meets the eye, because this is not just about Prince Harry losing. It's about the conspiracy that leveraged his lack of intelligence in order to pursue their own gains, and then promptly abandoned him and the other co-claimants when things didn't turn out the way they wanted them to. And
the bigger question is how a couple with that much attention, that much royal connection, that much public curiosity, and that many powerful contacts ended up with so many stalled projects, failed deals, awkward launches, and unanswered questions about where the money went. The Vanity Fair moment is a useful place to begin because it shows how Meghan understood image from the very start. She wanted the glossy version of the story, not just a tabloid reveal, not just paparazzi shots or gossip columns. She wanted the kind of respectable, glamorous, fashion-adjacent platform that could place her among women who were not merely famous, but aspirational. Vanity Fair, Vogue, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter. These were the types of publications that mattered in the world. Meghan had spent years trying to enter. The cover gave her status. It confirmed that she was no longer just trying to get into rooms. She was now the room people wanted to photograph. But even then, there were signs of tension. According to accounts that have circulated since, including reporting discussed in royal books and commentary, there were concerns around the way the piece developed. There were questions about the photographs, the styling, the tone, and how directly the Harry relationship would be handled. The palace reportedly did not want Meghan's royal connection turned into an uncontrolled publicity moment.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are allegedly running short of cash. And the reason why they're running short of cash, many people might suggest, is simply that they are incredibly bad with money. I mean, how can you get to this particular point? The other instance I wanted to highlight was that, well, basically, when you look at it a little bit deeper, you can see exactly how Meghan and Harry, time and time again, have let wonderful opportunities slip through their fingers, starting with this one. Vanity Fair at that particular point.
Meghan, however, still had her own publicist, her own representation, her own instincts, and her own idea of what the moment should be. This is important because Meghan was not yet fully inside the royal system, but she was already close enough to create complications. Once a person becomes publicly tied to a senior royal, the rules change. The palace expects discipline. Timing matters, messaging matters, access matters. The relationship is no longer just private. Every public move becomes part of the monarchy's image. Meghan, by contrast, came from an entertainment world where attention is currency. A magazine cover, a flattering feature, a glamorous photograph, a hint of romance, a carefully placed interview, these are tools. They are not threats. They are how a profile is built. So from the beginning, there was a clash between two systems. The palace system says, wait, coordinate, avoid overexposure, protect the institution. The Hollywood system says, seize the moment, build the brand, control the narrative, use the heat while it is there. Meghan understood the second system far better than the first. But understanding attention is not the same as understanding business.
And I think it's worthwhile mentioning because it really, I think, inspired today's video, which is that since leaving the protective bubble of the institution, Harry has been surrounded by people ready to make a quick buck off him. Publishers, streaming services, lawyers, and campaigners, all under the guise they're on his side. Now he's left to pick up the pieces while they move on. And
that is one of the central criticisms now made of the Sussex project. Meghan and Harry appeared to believe that attention itself would become money. In the short term, that was true. Their royal exit, their grievance story, their conflict with the palace, and their personal revelations were all commercially valuable. Companies wanted them, streaming platforms wanted them, publishers wanted them, Oprah wanted the sit-down, Netflix wanted the inside story, Spotify wanted royal audio content, Penguin Random House wanted the memoir. The first wave was real. The problem was what came after. Before Harry, Meghan had already shown that she knew how to cultivate a certain image. She moved in the right spaces, built useful relationships, and presented herself as stylish, independent, ambitious, and socially connected. She knew how to charm people. People who met her in those years often described someone who could be warm, attentive, flattering, and very focused on making an impression. That does not make her unusual. Hollywood is full of people who network, charm, reposition, and build themselves into something larger than their resume. Actors and actresses have always done this. The difference is that Meghan's eventual platform was not simply Hollywood, it was royalty. When Harry entered the picture, the stakes changed completely.
I think this is incredibly true. And yes, it doesn't absolve Harry of the horrific decisions, the horrific things that he has said over the years. But I also think it's important to understand that much like his mother Diana, when it came to the Martin Bashir interview, people have preyed off of Harry's paranoia. And I think in Harry's particular case, his lack of intellect. Harry, again, is not a particularly smart guy. And I'm not saying this to be rude or mean. I'm just stating this as basically sort of fact. This has been well known and discussed and reported on pretty endlessly. And
to Harry, Meghan seemed worldly, confident, glamorous, and self-made. She knew London private members clubs, she had designer clothes, she had expensive-looking taste. She had friends in media, fashion, and entertainment. She had a television career. She appeared to know how the world worked. For a prince who'd grown up inside palaces, protected from ordinary commerce, and surrounded by staff who handled details, that must have been impressive. Meghan looked like someone who could navigate the outside world better than he could. That is one reason Harry may have trusted her instincts so much. But the image was more complicated than it appeared. Meghan's acting career had brought recognition, but not the kind of fortune later suggested in some public narratives. She was not arriving with a massive entertainment empire behind her. She had worked hard, built a profile, and made herself visible. But she was not an Oprah, a Reese Witherspoon, a Gwyneth Paltrow, or a media mogul with a proven production machine. That distinction matters. There is a huge difference between being good at personal branding and being good at building a company. There is a difference between getting attention and sustaining a business. There is a difference between being photographed beautifully and creating content people will pay for again and again. Harry and Meghan's post-royal life often seems to have confused those things.
for Harry, I don't think he's smart enough to really understand how his lack of intelligence can be leveraged by people who are a lot smarter than him, or maybe even just a little bit smarter than him for their own gain. Of course, his wife being chief among them. But in this particular case with the Daily Mail, it's not just his wife, but it's the lawyers, the publication that's behind some of this, and the campaign. And this has been whispered about in different articles, so you'll see a moment where something...
The early relationship was wrapped in its own mythology. Meghan later described asking whether Harry was kind. Harry presented the romance as almost fated. They leaned heavily into the idea of two people finding each other against the odds, with Meghan not fully understanding the royal world and Harry seeking someone who could see the real man beneath the title. But critics have never accepted that simple version. They point out that Meghan had long shown interest in fame, style, public image, and royal theme. She had visited London, posed near Buckingham Palace when younger, and reportedly read or known about material connected to Princess Diana. Harry, in turn, has built much of his emotional identity around his mother. For someone trying to connect with him, Diana was always going to be a powerful emotional entry point. None of this proves calculation in the darkest sense. But it does show that the fairy tale version of the romance was always incomplete. Meghan was not a naive outsider. Harry was not simply a prince meeting someone untouched by his world. They were two ambitious people, each dissatisfied in different ways, who quickly saw in each other the possibility of escape and reinvention. Harry had already expressed frustration with royal life. He liked parts of it: the status, the causes, the military identity, the public affection.
It says byline times yada yada, or hacked off da 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 da. And those two pieces, byline times and hacked off, are huge influences, I think, in this case. They're trying to distance themselves, especially hacked off, saying that they had nothing to do with this case at all. But I can't help but think at the same time that they must have had something to do with this case. And they have been connected in other articles with everything that's happened. And yet, they're leaving Harry there holding the bag of doggy doo-doo on fire while they may claim they had nothing to do with any of this. But I think it's important to go over and expose those who I feel like, my very personal, humble opinion, are behind the scenes sort of manipulating things to their own end, and in particular in relation to the monarchy, leveraging the rogue royal that is Harry to do.
But he did not appear to love the discipline of lifelong service. Meghan, meanwhile, understood that marrying Harry could offer global recognition far beyond anything Suits had given her. Together, they imagined a third path, not fully royal, not fully private, not trapped inside the institution, but not cut off from its power either. The half-in, half-out idea that later collapsed at Sandringham appears to have been the dream. Royal status, global commercial freedom, charitable work, celebrity access, and financial independence. To them, perhaps, it sounded modern and reasonable. To the late Queen, it was impossible. The monarchy could not allow senior royal status to become a commercial passport. If Harry and Meghan were allowed to pick the glamorous parts of the role while monetizing their titles abroad, the whole structure would be weakened. Other royals would face pressure to do the same. Companies would pay for proximity to the crown. Public service and private profit would become blurred. The Queen said no. That should have been the moment Harry and Meghan understood the scale of the problem. Instead, they appear to have believed they could make it work anyway. Their belief was not entirely irrational. In the beginning, the world did throw money and attention at them. Oprah Winfrey had shown interest before the wedding. Hollywood figures wanted meetings.
Engelson and was already dating someone else, a celebrity chef. Meghan knew that she was in fact very beautiful, very much available and beguiling. She certainly knows how to work a room. I've met many different people over the years that were first captured by her. Friends that she, suddenly liked everything that you liked, became the best thing, called you up, asked your advice on fashion, hair, makeup, beauty, flattered you to the extreme. A very, very clever manipulator. And what's interesting, you see, is this really,
Streaming ideas were being floated even while they were still connected to royal life. There were reports of early conversations involving major entertainment names, including ideas that did not fit what the Sussexes wanted, but showed that the interest was there. The market saw value in them, but the market mostly saw value in one thing: royal inside information. That is the painful truth at the center of the Sussex business model. Companies did not pay for Harry and Meghan because they had proven they could produce hit shows, build consumer brands, run studios, or deliver best-selling lifestyle products year after year. They paid because Harry and Meghan had access to the royal story. The most valuable product was not compassion, it was not inspiration, it was not service, it was not feminism, mental health, cooking, polo, or philanthropy. The most valuable product was proximity to the monarchy and conflict with the monarchy. That explains the Oprah interview. As television, it was a global event. As a personal statement, it was dramatic. As a business decision, it may have been far less clever than it looked. Harry and Meghan had one truly explosive interview in them. One major sit-down where they could tell the world why they left, how they felt, what they believed happened, and how badly they thought they had been treated. Once that story was told,
houses and all sorts of crazy things. And a lot of this happened in the very early 2000s and maybe the late 90s, but really most of these cases are 20 to 30 years old. So the media landscape, especially with the advent of social media, has changed massively. So really some of the things that the plaintiffs co-claimants are complaining about aren't really factors anymore in the media landscape. It just doesn't exist in the same way. Phones are harder to trace, harder to track, harder to hack. Like, we're not using razor phones anymore. I got my iPhone. So here in this particular instance, and I think the other...
its commercial power began to shrink. They may have gained sympathy from some audiences, especially in America, but they also created permanent distrust with the royal family and alienated large parts of the British public. They turned family pain into content, they made reconciliation harder, and they tied their brand to grievance. That is a dangerous foundation for long-term success. Grievance sells once, it may sell twice. But eventually, audiences ask, what else do you have? Netflix was supposed to answer that question. The public figure often repeated around the Netflix deal was enormous, with many reports using the idea of a $100 million arrangement. But deals like that are rarely simple cash transfers. They are usually tied to production, deliverables, development, performance, and future projects. The headline number creates prestige, but the actual money depends on what gets made and how valuable it is. The project Netflix really wanted was obvious: the royal story. The documentary about Harry and Meghan, their relationship, their exit, their version of events, and their conflict with the palace. That was the crown jewel of the deal. That was the content no one else could provide. But after that, the results became much less convincing. Heart of Invictus had a worthy subject, but it did not become a major cultural phenomenon.
There are those who are very invested, I think, not only in, continuing this drive into, let's be honest, some bad actors within the British media, but also very, very invested in taking down the Daily Mail. And I think that's really, really key here. So let's go ahead and look. And when it came to this case, Harry lost. So Harry in particular on the stand, I didn't look at everyone, but it seemed to be for most of Harry's cases, he brought up a particular article and said, well, the information could have only been found out if...
Polo struggled to justify why a broad audience should care. Meghan's lifestyle programming required production costs, locations, staff, style, and polish. But the question remained whether viewers wanted Meghan as a lifestyle authority once the royal drama was removed. That is the production trap. Harry and Meghan may have imagined themselves as global content creators, but creating content is hard. It is expensive. It requires teams, structure, consistency, creative discipline, and the ability to generate ideas that do not depend on the same royal story. Their problem was not access to platforms. Their problem was output. Spotify exposed the same weakness. The reported numbers around that deal were also huge. But again, the reality was more complicated. Spotify did not simply want Meghan alone speaking occasionally about broad cultural themes. The power of the deal was Harry and Meghan together, a royal couple in audio. Their conversations, their network, their insights, their chemistry, their access. Instead, after a long delay, the main product became Meghan's podcast, Archetypes. It had a launch, it had celebrity guests, and it attracted attention. But it did not become the lasting audio empire Spotify had likely hoped for. When the deal ended,
he hacked my phone or got my cell phone records or something. But also, he had to admit friends knew about X story. So the judge is like, well, it could have either come from the phone or it could have come from your friends. You can't really prove it either way. And so you can't claim that just because you think your friends didn't blab that it must be phone hacking. That's not how this works. You need actual evidence. The burden was on the claimants to come in with evidence, and they didn't have any. So every single charge was dismissed.
One Spotify executive famously criticized them harshly, and that comment became part of the public narrative. The idea that Harry and Meghan had received a massive opportunity and underdelivered, that perception has followed them ever since. Then came the smaller projects, the attempted pivots and the brand experiments. There was the TIG, often described by supporters as evidence Meghan had lifestyle credentials. But the TIG was a blog. It showed taste, networking, and ambition. But it was not the same as a major consumer business. It did not prove she could build a Gwyneth Paltrow-style empire. There was The Bench, the children's book that received attention because Meghan wrote it, but did not become a lasting publishing phenomenon. There were animated project ideas, including Pearl, that did not survive. There were reports and rumors about fashion partnerships, luxury ambassador roles, and connections to brands like Dior or Cartier. But nothing seemed to become the transformative deal that would place Meghan securely in the luxury world. There was Lemonada Media, which looked like a quieter attempt to revive audio ambitions, but it did not carry the same prestige as Spotify. There was Clever Coffee, which resurfaced occasionally in the press. There were reports of investments or associations with smaller brands. There was, as ever, Meghan's lifestyle and product project.
And one of the stories that we went over yesterday, which is actually quite fortuitous, ladies and gentlemen, as you shall see, is Harry's older woman. And this is again about Natalie Pinkerton and their relationship and their flirting and everything, and a Daily Mail article talking about how much they were chatting and how there was a flirtation and that she's 6 years older than him. He was like 18 at the time. And this article comes from December of 2002. And yes, that's absolutely true. That's how old some of this case is. But what are we talking about in terms of
involving jam, home goods, and a carefully curated domestic aesthetic? But none of these has yet answered the central question: what is Meghan's actual commercial lane? Is she a producer, a lifestyle founder, a podcaster, a philanthropist, a royal commentator without saying she is a royal commentator, a wellness figure, a fashion figure, a speaker, a documentary subject, a duchess in exile? The brand has never fully settled. That lack of clarity is expensive. When a public figure launches one project after another without a clear core, the market begins to hesitate. Companies start asking whether the attention is worth the risk. Does the public love her or merely watch her? Will customers buy the product or just mock the launch? Does the association bring prestige or controversy? Will the project get finished? Will it create value? Harry faces a different version of the same problem. His strongest identity remains service: veterans, Invictus, mental health, military community, and childhood trauma. When he is in those spaces, he can still appear sincere and effective. But commercially, he has also become tied to confession, royal complaint, and personal revelation.
Byline Times. If you're not familiar with Byline Times, they kind of came to the royal forefront. I'll actually link my video from October of 2023 about them. And their first print edition was sort of a smear campaign against the royals. It very much took Harry and Meghan's side and also tried to smear Dan Wooten as well. And so it was very much investigating into particular things, making massive insinuations, most of which did not end up really holding up. And so that's how most royal watchers became aware of them. And they definitely...
Spare was a huge book because it promised access. It promised the inside story of royal life: William, Charles, Camilla, Meghan, Diana, and the emotional history of the spare prince. But once Harry told those stories, what was left for another book? The reported publishing arrangement was often described as a multi-book deal. Yet the momentum after Spare changed. Harry chose not to heavily update the paperback with fresh revelations, which suggested either restraint, exhaustion, legal caution, or simply a lack of appetite for another round of royal war at that moment. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. The biggest publishing card had already been played. That is the trap of tell-all economics. The first confession is valuable. The second may still sell. By the third, the public begins to feel manipulated or bored. The person telling the story risks becoming dependent on reopening wounds. For Harry, that is emotionally dangerous. For Meghan, it is commercially limiting. For both of them, it makes reconciliation with the monarchy almost impossible. And yet, reconciliation, or at least visible royal connection, remains their most valuable asset. That is why their return to Highgrove matters in this financial story. On the surface, it was a family meeting with King Charles.
And I wanted to pull up and show you guys something very critical here, which is that 53 stories about phone hacking and illegal private investigators at the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday. So it's talking about what you need to know, although ironically, Meghan Markle is here because it factors in Meghan versus the Mail, because again, they took her side. But the really crucial thing about this side here is that when it comes to the actual case brought into court, guess how many stories were brought in? It was 55.
But in brand terms, it also gave the Sussexes something they badly need: proof of contact with the crown. They did not get the public photograph many commentators believe would have been priceless. They did not get a grand royal reset. They did not get a formal route back into official life. But the fact of the meeting itself still helped them. It reminded the world that they are not simply ex-royals in California. They are still connected by blood to the king. That connection may be emotionally meaningful. It is also commercially powerful. This is why critics argue that Harry and Meghan have not truly built independence. They have built distance from royal duty while still depending on royal proximity. Their value rises when they are seen near the monarchy and falls when they have to stand entirely on their own output. That is the uncomfortable pattern. When the subject is royal conflict, the world watches. When the subject is Meghan's jam, Harry's polo show, or another lifestyle extension, the response is weaker. When Harry talks about William, people pay attention. When he gives speeches without that royal drama attached, the reaction is less certain. When Meghan is discussed as a duchess wronged by the palace, she dominates headlines.
So you're telling me that Byline Times came up with 53 stories they're claiming were the result of phone hacking, and somehow in the court trial there were 55 submitted, and there was one that was in common. Now, guys, I did not know this when I initially did my article my video yesterday, and I decided to go with just one particular story to kind of give an example, and it was Harry's older woman. And as it turns out, this was published on December 11th, 2019. One of the articles here, because
when she is positioned as an entrepreneur selling products, people ask whether the products themselves justify the attention. This is not because they have no talent at all. It is because their strongest asset remains the one they claim to have escaped. Money, therefore, becomes the measure of the contradiction. Harry and Meghan are not poor. They live a life of enormous privilege. They have wealthy friends, a valuable home, global name recognition, security arrangements, staff, lawyers, agents, advisors, and access most people could never imagine. But they also have expensive obligations. Their lifestyle costs money. Their security costs money. Their public relations costs money. Their productions cost money. Their legal battles cost money. Their brand experiments cost money. If the early giant deals are not replaced by new income, the pressure grows. That does not mean they are on the edge of ordinary financial hardship. It means their chosen life requires a level of income that cannot be sustained by headlines alone. The question now is what offer they take next. That decision matters because it will signal how the market sees them if they secure a major prestige.
Let me get down to it. Harry and Natalie, and Harry's older woman. And just looking at this and their sort of quote unquote evidence, it even gives you an example of why this case failed. And maybe it's because I have a background sort of not only in history, but I've been taught sort of how to evaluate arguments and see their strengths and weaknesses. This is part of your training as you get into higher and higher education. Part of your job, if you are at the graduate level, is to see a piece of research and go,
if they move into smaller, less glamorous partnerships, critics will say the decline has become visible. If Meghan becomes a paid speaker, people will ask what she can speak about beyond herself. If Harry returns to more confessional content, people will say the royal well has not run dry, but the dignity has. The speaking circuit is not simple either. Harry can speak about mental health, veterans, grief, resilience, and service. But the more headlines focus on old partying, drug references, family conflict, or personal awkwardness, the harder it becomes to sell him as an inspirational figure without baggage. Meghan can speak about leadership, women, media, identity, and entrepreneurship. But if audiences see her as someone whose own businesses have struggled to land, the credibility gap becomes a problem. Royalty is not like politics or entertainment. A politician can survive scandal by winning votes. A comedian can survive embarrassment by turning it into material. A celebrity can reinvent through shock. Royalty relies on dignity, restraint, and mystique. Once those are weakened, the commercial version of royalty becomes unstable. That instability has been visible in their attempts to create royal-style tours. The Sussexes have appeared to enjoy visits that look and feel like royal tours, even though they are no longer working royals.
Award-winning journalism here, I say with a lot of sarcasm. Evidence introduced in two major pieces of phone hacking litigation against the publishers of the Mail on Sunday's direct newsstand rivals, News Group newspapers, and Mirror Group newspapers identifies the use of such language as consistent with a legal news gathering. So if you say the word friends or friend, you must have hacked their phone. That's the only explanation for it. I kid you not, that's the reason they're claiming this was phone hacked. And it says in his 2015 judgment, and Gula.
These trips generate coverage, but they also create confusion. Are they representing themselves, their foundation, a cause, a brand, a memory of royal status, the monarchy by another name? If such trips do not translate into lasting income, partnerships, or public goodwill, then they become expensive attention exercises. The same is true of their website and public archive of achievements. If they want to present their post-royal life as a series of successes, they have to define what those successes are. Invictus remains Harry's strongest achievement, but it began before Meghan and before the royal exit. Archewell exists, but it has not become a cultural institution. Netflix brought attention, but mixed results. Spotify ended badly, the bench faded, Pearl disappeared, as ever is still trying to prove itself. That is why the question, where did the money go, has become so pointed. It is not only about bank accounts, it is about opportunity cost. Where did the Vanity Fair momentum go? Where did the royal wedding goodwill go? Where did the Oprah audience go? Where did the Netflix prestige go? Where did the Spotify promise go? Where did the publishing power go? Where did the global curiosity go?
First, that he was bombarding her with text messages and calls. The language which the judge said identified the misuse of private information is similar to that used in Katie Nichols' stories. Oh my gosh, guys. groundbreaking journalism here. You use the phrase bombarded her with text messages and calls and friends. So ergo, she must have hacked it. That's literally the reasoning. This is the groundbreaking journalism that Byline Ties offered. And supposedly, you could say to help bring this litigation to the forefront, because I guess they have a hatred for the data.
The answer is that much of it was spent on grievance, control, and short-term attention, rather than building durable institutions. Harry and Meghan could have taken a slower route. They could have left royal life, spent several quiet years building credibility, focused on a narrow set of causes, avoided direct attacks on the family, and developed products or media projects with real expertise behind them. They could have allowed the public to miss them. Instead, they saturated the market with themselves. Interview, documentary, podcast, memoir, brand launch, lawsuit, public statement, award, speech, another interview, another project, another criticism, another claim. For a while, the volume created power. Eventually, it created fatigue. This is why the Sussex story now feels less like a meteoric rise and more like a warning about mistaking fame for strategy. Fame opens doors. Strategy decides what happens after you walk through them. Meghan was excellent at reaching the door. Harry was born inside the most famous door in the world. Together, they had access to rooms few people ever see. But access is not achievement. Being wanted for one explosive story is not the same as being trusted with a long-term business. And in business, trust matters. Partners want reliability. They want delivery. They want a clear audience. They want public figures who enhance a brand without constantly creating risk. They want...
And then he also added, I guess, this judge. Information that was obtained from hacking would, if published, have its source disguised by attributing the source to a friend or a pal. As will appear, this had particularly caustic effect on the relationship of the victims. So it can both be true. Two things can be true at once. You can attribute a story to a friend or a pal if you hack their phone. But the story could have also come from a friend.
They want the talent to be worth the trouble. That is the test Harry and Meghan now face. Their greatest error may have been treating each major deal as proof of success before the work had actually been done. The Oprah interview was treated as vindication. The Netflix deal was treated as an empire. The Spotify announcement was treated as a creative breakthrough. The book deal was treated as literary power. The lifestyle relaunch was treated as commercial rebirth. But in every case, the announcement generated more confidence than the finished product. That is dangerous because announcements are easy. Delivery is where reputations are made. In Hollywood and media, people can survive one overhyped project. They can even survive two. But if the pattern repeats, the industry begins to classify them. Not publicly, perhaps the publicists will still speak warmly. Executives will still use careful language. But behind closed doors, the question becomes, are they worth the money, the time, and the risk? Harry and Meghan's challenge is that they are both high profile and high maintenance in the public imagination. Even if that reputation is unfair in some individual cases, it now exists. A brand considering Meghan
or a pal. Both things can be true at once. You cannot use that as evidence that somebody hacked a phone. Anybody with a smidge of intelligence should be able to tell you that. And yes, sometimes it was used to conceal illicit means, but sometimes it wasn't. So your job, your burden is to prove that it could only have come from illicit means. But obviously, that's not the case. You can't prove that. And that's why this Daily Mail case was thrown out. But again, there are story after stories here of Byline Times claiming
has to ask whether the press coverage will focus on the product or on Meghan herself. A platform considering Harry has to ask whether the project will become about the cause or about his family history. A production partner has to ask whether the couple can generate ideas beyond their own biography. That is where the royal story becomes both asset and trap. It is the reason people open the door, but it is also the reason they hesitate to go further. Royal association brings instant attention, but it brings scrutiny, division, and fatigue. It can make a launch enormous. It can also make failure more visible. This is especially true for Meghan because her public image has become so intensely interpreted. A jar of jam is not just a jar of jam. A flower arrangement is not just a flower arrangement. A dress, a bracelet, a photograph, a kitchen counter, a brand name, a delay, a missing product, a limited launch, all of it becomes evidence in a larger public trial about who Meghan really is. That is exhausting for any business. A lifestyle brand needs customers to enter a mood of trust and desire. They need to think, I want a piece of that world. But if every product is immediately dragged into a culture war, the emotional experience changes. Some supporters may buy out of loyalty.
A lot of it with Katie Nicholl and others claiming that the articles were only gotten through illicit means. And while I haven't had a chance, guys, to go through all these, I would bet you, sorry, I forgot to throw up the page there. I haven't gone through all of these articles, but I would bet you a decent amount of them ended up in this court case. Because the Byline Times most likely helped or assisted, at least with part of the research going, well, this is what we figured out. Because the groundbreaking journalism here is the use of the phrase friends.
But broader customers may step back. They may not want to feel they are voting in a royal argument every time they purchase a candle, jam, tea, or home product. That is why Meghan's brand needs distance from the feud more than it needs another royal headline. The same is true for Harry and his charitable identity. Invictus works because it is bigger than Harry. It has real participants, real sacrifice, real emotion, and real purpose. When Harry is simply the patron and supporter, he gains dignity from the cause. But when the Sussex drama surrounds the event, the cause risks being used as a backdrop to his personal story. For Harry, the best commercial decision may actually be less commercial ambition. Fewer interviews, fewer confessional projects, fewer attempts to explain, more discipline, more focus. More proof that he can serve without turning service into autobiography. For Meghan, the best decision may be the opposite of the old Vanity Fair instinct. Less emphasis on being seen as important, and more emphasis on making something customers actually return to. A real business can survive mockery if the product is excellent. But no amount of perfect lighting can save a brand that does not know what it is selling. This is why advisors matter. One of the recurring questions around Harry and Meghan is who was telling them no? Who was saying the Oprah interview might damage long-term trust?
And bombarded with texts and emails. Those are not analogous to anything illicit. Yes, they may have used similar languages, but sometimes similar language is just something that is used that does not convict anybody of actual criminal malice. You cannot use that in that effect. And so this is just completely and utterly just hogwash. But I just find it fascinating, again, that there were supposedly 53 stories about phone hacking and illegal private investigators at the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday. And yet somehow at trial, there ended up being 55. Very curious number.
Who was warning that Spotify would require regular, disciplined production? Who was explaining that Netflix needed more than royal grievance? Who was telling Meghan that luxury brands would not automatically hand over prestige just because she had a title? Who was telling Harry that personal revelation has a cost? Perhaps people did say these things and were ignored. Perhaps the advice was divided. Perhaps the couple believed their own instincts were stronger than the experience of everyone around them. Whatever happened, the results suggest that attention was often mistaken for strategy. The first act was royal escape. The second act was royal revenge. The third act was supposed to be empire. But the empire has not arrived. What exists instead is a collection of fragments, a lifestyle brand still trying to define itself, a production company with mixed output, a foundation with limited public identity, a prince still tied to old wounds, a duchess still chasing the perfect platform, and a couple whose commercial value rises every time the palace door opens even slightly. That is why Highgrove felt so significant. It suggested that despite everything, the royal connection is not dead. For Harry personally, that may matter deeply. For Meghan commercially, it matters too.
There. And they encompassed a lot of the same people. So we have a Sadie Frost here, mentioned as well, and others connected to this. And why I think this is important, especially for, let's say, Prince Harry and his future in the monarchy, is that I looked. And despite, again, having this whole article and a couple other articles about the Daily Mail and its dastardly deeds, have they commented on this case at all?
It also highlights the central weakness of their independence. If you need the monarchy to validate your brand, you are not truly free of it. The tragedy is that they really did have everything needed to build a sustainable new life. They had recognition, sympathy from many, access to elite advisors, money, global platforms, and the fascination of the public. Few people in modern media have ever been given such a strong launch. But they seem to have believed that being Harry and Meghan was enough. It was enough to get the first deals. It was not enough to keep them. Now they need a genuine second act. And second acts are harder than first acts because the market is no longer buying potential. It is judging results. For Meghan, that means as ever must become more than a mood board, more than limited products, more than soft focus domestic imagery. It has to sell, scale, and survive criticism. For Harry, it means returning to the areas where he still has credibility. Invictus, veterans, grief, service, and perhaps a quieter form of public work that does not depend on attacking his family. For both of them, it means understanding that royal proximity can create headlines, but it cannot build a business forever. The Vanity Fair cover once suggested Meghan had arrived. The Oprah interview suggested the Sussexes could dominate the world stage. The Netflix deal suggested they could become media power players. The Spotify deal suggested they could build an audio empire. The book deal suggested Harry's story could command extraordinary money. But years later, the question is not whether they got attention, they did. The question is what they built with it. And right now, that answer is far less impressive than the original promise. That is why the financial conversation around Harry and Meghan is not going away. It is not just gossip about rich people spending too much. It is a story about missed chances, weak execution, and the danger of believing that fame can replace discipline. They wanted freedom from the royal family. They wanted financial independence. They wanted global influence on their own terms. But independence requires more than leaving. It requires building something that can stand without the institution behind you. That is the challenge they have not yet solved. And until they do, every new deal, every product launch, every royal visit, every private meeting with the king, and every rumor about the next project will be judged against the same question. Where did the opportunity go? Because at the beginning, Harry and Meghan did not have too little. They had almost too much. Too much attention, too much curiosity, too much sympathy from some audiences, too much money on the table, too much confidence that the world would keep paying for whatever they chose to do next. But attention has a shelf life. Sympathy can curdle, money has conditions, platforms demand output, brands need clarity. And the public eventually wants more than a story about leaving. It wants to know what you became after you left. That remains the unanswered question for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.